Hello friends, welcome back to the channel, and today I would like to share with you my review of the Wolf Remains 160 scale Logar, which is basically a Barbatos Lupus Rex in a perfect grade scale. Now to preface this review, while this is a third-party kit that looks pretty decent, it is a rather meticulous building experience. I will do my absolute best to point out all the things that I think you should watch out for if you go for this build, but it will not be a seamless experience as you would have with a modern Bandai kit or something from SNAA or in era. With that being said though, and not to spoil the verdict of my video at the beginning of it, this kit is an absolute looker. And before we dive into the details, here is a very quick message about Gundamit. I buy almost all of my figures and third-party kits at Gundamit.com. They offer great prices, awesome customer service and a nice points program. If you decide to shop for your next kit or figure there and would like to support this channel even more, consider using reviewer code SKH. It helps the channel a lot. As always, do your own research and only purchase from stores that you are comfortable with. Now, back to the video. So, Logar. This kit came in a bit of a concoction of boxes. At first it was a bit odd as I'm frankly not used to this experience, but I guess if it works, it works. So I had a collection of roughly 6 boxes which Gundamit packed in one of their shipping boxes, and in that I had the main box of runners, a small box full of maze parts which were already cut out of the runners, a plastic tray for the metal inner frame, and a few baggies for decals, the manual, the LED and the bonus cape was just thrown in the box. Gladly, at least in my copy, nothing seems to have been damaged in transit. And also please be aware that for some reason this maker decided to cut out and pre-apply some of the plastic parts to the metal inner frame. At first, when I was inspecting the runners, I honestly thought that I had missing parts, but nope, it turned out that they just did some of the work for me. Another thing that you should watch out for with this kit is the manual. It has a fair number of mistakes, like this one. At first I thought I would mark down each of the instances where the part number in the manual is different from the actual runner, but honestly there's just too many of these instances. However, the pictures are clear enough and fairly easy to follow, so what I would recommend is using a visual reference. It will take a bit longer to find the required parts, but will be less annoying than looking up the runner letter, then part number, only then to find out that it doesn't match the picture. The building process overall is split in sections, but you don't get some of the modern conveniences like runner list per stage or the colored prints. And you assemble each part in full. Because of the heavy reliance on the inner frame, there is no plastic inner frame really to speak of. While in kits like Motor Nuclear that also use metal inner frame, there you also layer some fake inner frame imitation on top of that. Here you pretty much add armor on top of the metal inner frame, but more on the inner frame in a second. As for the border decals, you actually get a pretty large sheet of those with a few numbered decals and a single page color guide at the end. The majority of decals are generic IBO themed decals, so on one hand you will need to be creative to figure out where to place them, and on the other hand they are pretty standard and blending well with the rest of the aesthetic. In terms of the decal quality, these are frankly not the best. The small ones were easy enough to work with, however I had 2 instances where the larger logos simply disintegrated when I tried to slide them off the paper and onto the parts. It felt almost like they were pre-cut or something, and I would strongly recommend to over-soak these decals before applying them. I had to overfill my moisturizer box and still had to dunk them in water before they would be willing to slide. So the larger number decals are going to be a bit of a pain, but the tiny ones gave me no issues. And as you can see, I applied quite a lot of them. Oh, and the full transparency as always, I used Mr. Mark Setter to apply them and Mark Softer to clean up the residue. I hardly ever apply decals without the use of those solutions. Anyhow, moving on to the plastic quality. It is a bit of a mixed bag as well. In addition to what initially looked like missing parts that turned out to simply be pre-applied parts, some runners are doubled up, such as runner N, whereas one of the runner N has parts that are missing details, so you couldn't attach those parts to the actual kit, while there is another version of Runner Ant that has all those issues fixed. At the end of the day, it's fine. The building experience once again can be a little challenging. Then lots and lots of parts have rather poor gate placements. You can see in the up-close shots that some of the more prominent examples, like here on the legs, the hilts of the swords, the V-fin, the backpack, some of the parts are undergated, but not most. I tried to level in those parts as much as I could, but realistically, if you want to get rid of the gates, full painting of this kit is the way to go. Then some white armor parts had printing issues too. I had instances with print overruns and overall sloppy molds, and my white faceplate was missing a mouse slit, which I had to cut out with a knife, and some warping here and there in certain parts. Most of those I was able to work around with the help of a hobby knife, but once again, it won't be perfect, and your mileage may vary. On the other hand though, the plastic detail prints were mostly super crisp and sharp, and it had a decent surface texture. So the end result actually looks not too bad at all, considering that I applied absolutely no top coat to this build. Then the construction and the inner frame. As I mentioned before, this is a rather meticulous build, so in addition to fixing print issues and dealing with the manual inaccuracies, most of the pegs on this build either needed to be thinned or shortened or both. Most of the holes on the plastic parts had to be widened or extended as they simply did not line up with their counterparts. Surprisingly though, in most instances where plastic interacts with the metal inner frame, those were fine. I had no fitment issues. The problems occurred mostly when it was plastic on plastic interaction. Then the metal inner frame and the articulation. The metal inner frame for this kit is extremely stiff straight out of the box. I believe the maker even recommended in one of their posts to break the metal frame in before the assembly, and by breaking in they mean just working the joints a little bit. They will loosen up, but not too much, and frankly you don't want them to loose, as this is a big and heavy boy once assembled, so it just needs to be stiff. Giggity, but I digress. The difficulty comes when you try to pose this beast. While the inner frame appears to be strong enough for more intricate poses, there is a lot of limitation caused by the armor, especially the waist. It is extremely limiting and flimsy. While I think I was able to pull off some nice poses for the review, the posing of this kit was a very frustrating experience. So many armor parts try to detach at the slightest touch or risk breaking or will pierce your skin as you try to articulate this model. It can be quite frustrating. So just be patient, and on the flip side, as you see, you can pose this kit without the included action stand, and it can even, for the most part, hold its gigantic mace. And that thing is massive, at nearly 60 centimeters in length and probably half a kilo in weight, but more on the accessories later. So going through the articulation real quick in detail. The ankles are split in terms of front to back movement, but side to side it is an entire foot only articulation. The front of the foot can struggle to hold the weight of the kit, so it tends to look something like this when it bears weight. And the front two yellow, toenails are single-handedly responsible for a few new gray hairs in my head. Those things can't stay in place for their dear lives, and since it is a weight-bearing location, they just fly away at the slightest touch. Please be very careful with them. The ankle has some rotation at the lower peg. The knee bend is quite limited by the inner frame, and there are no thigh or lower leg armor gimmicks that are attached to the knee joint. You can articulate the front and back lower leg armor flaps and the side knee armors, but that's about it. The upper thigh is monolithic and the waist joint can actually drop down. The thigh articulation is quite limited by the waist armor, but is still stiff enough to bear the weight of the kit. You could get more range by removing the waist armors, but that won't look as sexy. The torso is on a single super duper stiff peg, but can turn around and the torso can also lead side to side. The kit has a very decent front to back ab crunch motion, and it is actually too much for its own pistons. So if you try to do a full ab crunch forwards, the piston at the back will pop out, so beware of that. Then we get a neat cockpit at the front of the upper chest, which is a nice touch. But when it comes to posing, is a bit of a nuisance, as it keeps opening at the slightest touch. Going up to the arms, they are attached on a very firm metal joint and are extremely stiff at the shoulders. I am ashamed to admit that I broke one of the shoulder pistons trying to attach the left arm. I tried to fix it with some glue, but it seems nothing short of a metal rod replacement will do the trick, as articulating this stiff joint breaks up the glue and the included silver-plated pistons are very fragile. But the pistons are not functional, of course, so we move on. The shoulder armors have very limited articulation, while the arm itself can swing around and turn quite easily. We also get a peg mount at the bicep for easy rotation. By the way, be extra careful rotating the arm at the bicep. It is very stiff yet again, and it feels like the peg can easily break, so grab very close to the bicep when rotating the arm. Do not grab at the forearms. And speaking of forearms, while we get a nice bend at the elbow, there is no forearm rotation. The elbow joint is actually one of the looser joints of this kit, and it will struggle to hold the gigantic mace at more extreme angles. Then we get two pairs of hands. One pair of fully articulated hands which you need to assemble, and they will allow you to create some neat gestures. But they can't turn into a fist and tend to come apart if you bend a finger too much. And another pair of rubbery holding hands. Their pre-assembled POM joints on both pairs were not strong enough to once again hold the massive mace, so I had to opt out for more reserved poses. Going up to the head, it is a very simple assembly, and despite its obvious gate marks, I think the V-fin is done very well. I like the addition of the fiery eyes effect accessories, and the V-fin is sturdy enough to hold them. The side armor on the head comes in two colors, white and gray, and I use the latter in my build. These things have also a tendency to fall off at the slightest touch as well. Lastly, the head unit also comes with a built-in LED gimmick, and while I once again don't like that it uses batteries, at the very least, this LED consists of 3 PCBs, one with a magnetic switch, one for the battery, and one with the LEDs. I think this LED option is like the easiest to modify with the USB power, because all it took was desoldering the battery power leads from the LED PCB and replacing them with my own wire that led to a USB-A plug. And that's it. No need to wire my own LEDs, no need to add resistors, as the LED PCB already had one on it. I still want to find a better way to manage the LED wire on the power supply end and find a better way to supply the actual power, as I think this dangling wire and the wired power brick that just doesn't look too nice. However, it's not a big problem, and I would rather take this over batteries any day of the week, and when the kit is on a shelf and static, the wire is very easy to hide. Going back to the backpack, there isn't much to say, really. It is a monolithic construction with no gimmicks to speak of, except for the stinger. It can be articulated and detached to float around. You also get a thick, long wire for the connection, which leads me nicely to accessories. The backpack stinger is very nice. I really like the mold, and with a few decals it looks really clean. Then we get two lean swords that can be stored on the backpack. Nothing special about those, except that one of them was pretty heavily warped, which is easily fixed by applying some hot air and carefully bending it back. Then we also get two underarm bigger swords. These are the same ones as they use on the mace, and they attach to the forearms, so you don't have to hold them in hands. And speaking of the mace, it is easily the standout feature of this kit. It is simply ginormous. At about 60 centimeters in length and probably half a kilo in weight. I'm also glad to see they used a metal shaft on the hilt, as it is very much warranted here. The mace does not have any transformation gimmicks, but can be taken apart and turned into a bit of a club if you are into that sort of thing. There is also a pair of tiny underhand launchers, but they are so generic that I didn't even bother detailing them and using them in any of the poses. And finally, we get a bonus cape and two 2 action bases. The cape is decent and has a thick wire for articulation. It is not as good as something like Himoxian Thor's cape, but overall it's fine and it adds a little bit of regal look to the kit. The main action base is subtle and does the job quite well. Certainly sturdy enough to hold this big bad wolf. However, the secondary action base for the Stinger was a bit of a disappointment. I appreciate the inclusion of it, but at the same time, it is a metal screw assembly, which means it gets loose each time you try to articulate it. And the crab claw at the end of it, that's supposed to grab the Stinger, is attached on such a thin peg that it broke off from the partial resistance from wire. It is an easy fix with some drilling and metal rod insertion, but they could have spared themselves all this hassle by using a more modern construction similar to what Bandai uses in newer action bases or modern nuclear does for their kits. A bit of a letdown there, but the included wire is actually so thick that it can hold the Stinger without the stand, and that's what I did on my shelf. Then custom work. I didn't do too much to this kit. As I mentioned earlier, this kit needed a lot of fixing, which consumed quite a bit of time. But the surface of armor is actually pretty decent, so no top coat is strictly required. I panel lined the entire kit with the help of steady water-based panel liners, and I modified the LEDs with a custom USB-A power lead. Also, I applied the vast majority of the decals from the included sheet, but that technically is not a customization. Lastly, I was sent a pack of metallic markers by Gaahleri for testing and review, so full disclosure, I got these for free, but all opinions are strictly my own. These markers use sharp plastic nibs, similar to Bandai ones, but unlike the Gundam markers, these are water-based and safe to use on ABS plastic. I used the flashy gold color on some verniers and the dark gunmetal color on the top of the backpack vents. Since these are pour type markers, you can't easily use them where otherwise soft-tipped markers would be ideal. You can see on the verniers, with many edges and crevices, they cause the paint to pull up in those crevices. But when applied to a flat surface, like the top of the backpack, you actually get a sturdy, even and level coat. I also appreciate their clear presentation and packaging, but I would advise to use some spare parts to figure out the actual paint colors, as the caps are just an approximation. These seem to go for about 25 Canadian bucks for a set of 10 in this tube box, which is a pretty damn good price. And while these won't replace the soft-tipped markers, I will certainly be using these Gaahleri markers instead of the Gundam markers from now on. If you are interested in buying these, consider checking out my affiliate link below. Cheers! So, overall impressions and final thoughts on Big Bad Wolf King Barbatos. This kit will make you work for it. It will make you curse, and it might even make you bleed. But if you equip yourself with enough patience and follow along my build process, video will drop next week by the way, you will get yourself a very cool looking and massive King Barbatos. And hey, if a noob like me can build it, you guys will have zero issues, and I can't wait to see your painted builds. So for about 90 bucks US, it is a pretty good deal, but it will make you work for it. However, if you are prepared to tackle it and you like the design, this kit is very similar to something like Red Comet. It will not be easy to pose and will have its quirks, but it will look absolutely phenomenal on the shelf and is guaranteed to draw a lot of positive attention. So it is a very rewarding experience at the end of the day. But still, I want to reiterate that it needed a lot of work, and given the packaging and some warping, I'm not sure if quality control is really there, so your mileage may vary. And with that being said, this kit is a pretty good deal if you like the design and would like to have your own copy of the Big Bad Wolf King Barbatos. Consider checking out Gundam and use my reviewer code to directly support this channel if you want to buy this kit. I hope that you enjoyed this review. Be sure to drop a like if you did and a comment if you really did. I live stream every Saturday, so hop on over and hang out. Also, all of my gear and tools are listed in the description of all of my videos. The links are affiliates, and every time you use them, you help me make more cool content like this. I also recently started a Flickr account where I post high-res pictures of my builds. It's free to check out and has lots of cool static shots that are not included in my videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.